Hello. Hopefully you all are having an awesome weekend. So, my name is Jacob Stone, and this is my discussion 5.1 response for scaffolding and how to support online students. So in this response, I'm going to kind of talk about my three methods, as well as some other content related to blended and online learning and how to kind of support students through that. So first off, a little bit of an introduction. So I've kind of experienced blended and online learning before. Last year with the pandemic, I essentially was online most of the year. So I kind of used my experience prior to this to kind of dwell on what kind of went right and what kind of went wrong. And that's what kind of helped me bring about some of the things I'm going to talk about. So first off, mixing or blending instruction with online. So it can be very difficult to either blend or to go completely online. And I would say probably the hardest thing that I learned was essentially some of the normal things in class that we take for granted, like easily being able to talk or communicate with somebody, working with other students, building relationships, certain things like that that you don't really think about in a traditional online, or pardon me, not online, but in a traditional classroom. And online, you kind of have to do a few things, especially if you're doing a project or some sort of blended activity. So when it comes to incorporating a online and blended classroom, especially with in-person time and projects, a lot of it comes down to time and planning. You kind of have to figure out the time frame. You kind of have to plan quite a bit, and kind of figure out what might go well and what might not go well. One thing that I learned that goes really well when you do in-person classes and online learning is having some sort of online groups, whether that's groups on Zoom or having assigned groups that students work together with or whatnot. Having those online groups are kind of key, and it's one of the reasons why it's going to be one of my methods later. But yes. Also, giving clear directions is really, really important. Not just giving clear directions, but making it very visible. I learned that the hard way quite a few times. Being able to make sure that students not only understand what they're doing, but that it's clearly displayed in a place that's easy for them to access is very, very important. Especially if you're doing online classwork or a project. Having those clear directions and being able to kind of access your groups are kind of important for online. And then finally, learn from mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes online, obviously because no one has ever really done online before in the way that was done last year. And I did make a lot of mistakes, but one of the big things is that I learned from those mistakes. And that was kind of a big thing with that. When it comes to evolving roles and differences of teachers online, when it comes to the role of the teacher, one big thing I kind of realized is that you kind of have to move away from the objectionist type of activities and teaching. We learned about the different spectrums within the last couple weeks, and really objectionist does not really work well at all online, at least from my experience. And kind of moving away from that is kind of key to excelling online. So honestly, one of the other roles that the teacher kind of takes is that it's less talking, less traditional, less objectionist, and kind of moving more towards the teacher being a facilitator and guiding students, whether that's helping students go through an activity or a project, or kind of guiding students and kind of helping create student-centered and student-led activities. That seems to work the best when doing online, and that really is a huge role that I think teachers are kind of moving towards, even in a traditional setting. And then finally, preparing for the workplace. As educators, it is kind of our job to help prepare students for the workplace and make sure that we have the activities, we kind of mimic the workplace in ways that not only allow them to kind of get a feel for it, but to also kind of work on those skills that are important, like 21st century skills. That is very important when it comes to that. And then finally, challenges and solutions to transitioning online. I think one of the big challenges is seeing and connecting the educator and the peers. So not only for the teacher to really connect with their students, but also for the students to kind of connect with their peers. I think that's a very challenging situation, and it's something that can be very difficult online. Attendance and engagement both kind of tend to fall or lower as online learning kind of goes forward, and that can be very difficult, especially since you're not seeing the student in person. Also, the learning management system that is being used can be difficult because students have to, in a lot of cases, may have to learn it. They may not know how to work it, and if it's complex, it can be very confusing. And then finally, how do we really know kids are really learning? That tends to be a very big question, especially when thinking back on last year with virtual learning. And how do you really know that students are really kind of getting it? What kind of ways are educators going to use in order to really figure out if kids are learning? And the solutions to these, I think, kind of fall on the methods that I'm about to talk about. Because I feel like even though these aren't everything that I think are one and done and can help solve everything, I think they are very good methods that help hit these markers, at least to a certain degree. So, my top 3 methods for supporting blended online learners. So you have online groups, multiple ways of communication, and then weekly schedule with all resources. So online groups, as quoted from the Purdue University Global article, online learning requires motivation to complete tasks, stay engaged, and make progress. When you're not surrounded by classmates and instructors in a physical setting, it may be tempting to procrastinate. So, I feel like having online groups kind of helps with the issues that come with online learning because students can feel kind of isolated. They can kind of feel left out. And these online groups can be made in different ways. It could be a chat room. It could be some sort of Zoom group or other video call, or it can just be assigned groups that work together. And essentially, this not only allows students to kind of interact and connect with each other, but allows them to kind of collaborate and helps increase engagement since they are working with others and they'll feel more involved with the process. It also allows students to support each other during and also outside of class, so they can kind of lean on each other, kind of like a support group in a way. And then finally, it allows for group activities and projects such as PBLs, so like problem-based or project-based learning, and jigsaws. So this kind of makes it a little bit easier to do these group activities. My second method is multiple ways of communication. As referenced in Bates, research has clearly indicated that perceived instructor presence is a critical factor for online student success and satisfaction. Students need to know that the instructor is following the online activities to students and that the instructor is actively participating during the delivery of the course. So overall, communication is a huge factor of online learning. And this kind of goes back to one of the concepts talked about in most of the articles from this week, and that's, the teacher needing to have a presence. So students are going to be more engaged. They're going to be more, pretty much everything is going to be better for a student if they feel like that the instructor is present. And one of the most important ways to do that is to make sure that students can communicate with the instructor. So this method kind of calls for students being able to communicate with the instructor, whether it's through Zoom, whether it's multiple emails, whether it's through a learning management system like Canvas or Leo, I think giving students multiple ways to communicate with the educator is very important and will kind of help with this presence. It also will increase support and will help the educator kind of connect to the students, because if there's multiple different ways of communicating and the instructor's good with communicating through these ways, students will kind of feel like that they're able to rely on that educator, kind of building a connection with them. And then finally, you have weekly schedule with all resources. So this is something that I not only used last year, but this year as well. And I found that if you kind of make a little schedule each week of what you're kind of doing in class, and you kind of link all the handouts, all the slides and links, it makes it a lot easier for students to stay organized and to keep track of their work. Also, if they do miss class or they're missing an assignment, they can easily just go to the schedule and find the work they're missing. This also really helps parents too, because parents want to know kind of what's going on in class. And when they kind of see the schedule, it allows them to kind of realize that, hey, this is what my kid's doing in class. So not only can I check up on my kid and make sure that they're on point, but it kind of makes the parents feel a little bit better knowing that they know what's kind of going on. And then finally, like I kind of mentioned earlier, it makes it easier for students to find resources. So this really helps with organization. It helps with ease of using the learning module or the learning management system. And overall, I think it's just a huge benefit to the students, especially if they're all online. So these are my 3 methods, and this essentially kind of sums up some of the big things that I kind of came up with this week. So thank you for listening, and I hope that you have an awesome rest of the weekend. And then here are my references.